Good morning. Good to see you. I see some of you are back home. So I just want to welcome you. It's good to see you after a while. I know it's always good feeling to be home, isn't it? Especially when mommy is cooking again. Is that right? Some of you. And enjoying family and your church where you grew up. I see some visitors also. I'm not familiar with some of you, but I want to welcome you too. And all of you who are visiting with us online. I know that God has at least one sentence for you throughout this service. And some of you have been already blessed. And we are blessed in this church to have so many talented people, and they are using their gifts to glorify God and to bless us. And I'm also blessed. Last time I preached, we started this series on biography of Joseph. So throughout the summer, we will study the life of Joseph and learn some lessons from his life that are applicable to our daily experiences. And I just want to share a few things for those of you who were not here the last time we started, so you can catch up, and then we will continue with today's presentation. So when we study the biography of Joseph, we see that he was favored son, but hated brother. And there are 6 reasons why Joseph was Jacob's favorite son. First, he was the son of his old age. Second, he was the child of Rachel, Jacob's favorite, beloved wife. Third, Joseph was motherless. Remember when Rachel gave birth to his younger brother Benjamin, she died. So that was another reason why his father loved him so much. Number 4, he was handsome in form and appearance. Number 5 reason why Joseph was Jacob's favorite son. Joseph had a beautiful character. And 6th reason why Joseph was Jacob's favorite son, it was that Joseph was easiest to raise. Then we had 5 reasons why Joseph's brothers hated him. Number 1 reason, the purity of Joseph's character reproved their sins. 2nd reason, Joseph brought a bad report of them to their father. That didn't go well with his brothers. Number 3 reason why they hated him. The father loved Joseph more than he loved them. The 4th reason why his brothers hated him, the coat of many colors implied Jacob's intention to make Joseph his heir. And the 5th reason why his brothers hated him, because Joseph's dreams were taken as an expression of his own intentions in the matter. So now we know the reasons why he was loved, why he was a favorite son, and reasons why his brothers hated him and despised him. And their hatred came to the boiling point. And when the first opportunity came, when they were alone with him, without father being far away, they made decision to kill him. And if it was not for God's intervention when he sent those Midianites caravan, right at that time, they would have killed him. But then one of them came with the idea, hey, what's the point of killing him? Let's get something in return, you know what I mean? So we get rid of him, and on top of that, we get some money. So they sold him as a slave. And you know, I can imagine Joseph at that time being dragged by this caravan on the road from Canaan to Egypt, thinking, wow, what have I done wrong? Why me? But you see, Joseph also decided, in spite of all these circumstances, he made the decision, I'm going to be faithful to God no matter what. I'll do what's right no matter what. Right then, that bad experience, as he was traveling from Canaan to Egypt, he made the decision, I'm going to follow my God no matter what. And you know, In Romans chapter 8, verse 28, he says, and we know that God causes everything to work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purpose for them. Imagine Joseph thinking, why is this happening? What good can come out of this? But you see, our ways are not God's ways. God has a plan that sometimes is strange, and his ways might look strange, but at the end, they end up well for everybody. For everybody. And remember, we compared the life of Joseph also with the life of Moses. And we talked the life of Moses was made up of 3 segments. First 40 years, as Dwight Moody says, he spent his life thinking he was somebody. Moses. You know, he was the prince of Egypt, general of the armies, conqueror. The second 40 years of his life, Moses spent learning that he was nobody in the desert. And the last 40 years of his life, Moses was discovering what God can do with a nobody. The same thing is in the life of Joseph and in your and my life. We also have 3 segments. So the Joseph's first segment was 17 years there, not just 40. But it took 17 years to build his ego. And Joseph spent 17 years thinking he was somebody. He was the favored son. He had a Versace robe, colored, you know what I mean? Designer. So he was somebody. And then he spent 13 years learning he was nobody. And then he spent last 80 years of his life discovering what God can do with a nobody. And what is interesting, when we compare their lives, you see, Joseph spent more time in the last segment of his life, the third one, discovering what God can do through nobodies like him than Moses did. You see, Moses' ego was built for 40 years. That's why it took longer to be undone. Joseph's ego was built only for 17 years, so it took less. So he spent only 13 years learning that he was nobody. And then majority of his life, he spent discovering what God can do through nobodies. And I mentioned to you Daniel. Daniel had even better experience. Daniel spent most of his time and very few years, learning that he was nobody. And the question with you and me is, which segment of your life are you right now? Are you still in a segment of your life because of who you are, who you know, the way you look, the things that you possess, thinking that you are somebody? Or you are maybe right now in a desert of your life where you are learning that you are nobody. Maybe your health has left you completely. Maybe you lost the job. Maybe your relationships are falling apart. I don't know what's going on in your life. But maybe right now you see how everything is fragile. And then we are like a grass that today is and tomorrow is gone. And God hopes and God arranges circumstances in our life to help us come to the third segment in our life. And He wants us to spend most of our life in this third segment of our life, where we will spend our life discovering what God can do through nobodies like you and me. So that's just a bonus for those of you who were not here last time. I can collect 2 tithes after this service. That's fine with me. So today we are continuing with our biography and story of Joseph. And the title is Joseph Resisting Temptation. So I would like us to read Genesis chapter 39 from 1 till 6. If you have your Bibles, you can open. If you don't, you can follow it on the screen. The version that I'm using is the New King James Version. And here it says, "Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him down there. The Lord was with Joseph, and he was a successful man. And he was in the house of his master the Egyptian. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all he did to prosper in his hands. So Joseph found favor in his sight and served him. Then he made him overseer of his house, and all that he had put under his authority. So it was, from the time that he had made him overseer of his house and all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of the Lord was on all that he had in the house and in the field. Thus he left all that he had in Joseph's hand. And he did not know what he had except for the bread which he ate. Now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. You see, arriving in Egypt, Joseph was sold to Potiphar, the captain of the guard of Pharaoh. And Joseph found himself in the country and a culture he did not know, surrounded by the language he didn't understand, and interacting with the people he had never seen before. An openly favored son of Jacob has been sold as a common slave and forced into a situation that seemed even worse than the pit in which his brothers had initially thrown him. You see, while Joseph's circumstances changed, God did not change. Isn't that interesting? Your and my circumstances can change, but our God does not change. And He's always with His children and enables them in their greatest challenges. And the Bible tells us here that the Lord was with Joseph, and the Lord caused all that he did to prosper in his hands. And there are several verses that I want to share with you to reassure us that God is with us regardless of the circumstances that we are in, whether they are good or bad. In Matthew 28, the second part of the verse 10 says, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. Good times or bad times, doesn't matter. I am always with you. Hebrews chapter 13, second part of verse 5. For he himself has said, I will never leave you, nor forsake you. We might leave God, but he will never leave us. Isaiah 41:10. Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. Yes, I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. He does not change. Our circumstances might change, but not our God. And no matter what adversity comes our way, God will be with us and He will help us. You see, God was the secret of Joseph's success. Luck had nothing to do with it. And Potiphar's confidence in Joseph increased daily. Ultimately, the captain of the guard put him in charge of his household. He put all that he possessed, under Joseph's jurisdiction. Here was a slave who had earned the right to be respected, trusted, and empowered. Joseph is Potiphar's favorite servant. Your antennas up? Favorite servant. Joseph is again somebody. He's not anymore nobody. What a tremendous promotion from a common slave to running the household of the top military man in Egypt. Very, very interesting. He was somebody when he was favored son of his father. And he went all the way down, becoming a slave. Now he is again almost at the same position before, at the highest that you can be as a slave. CEO of Potiphar's household. Very, very interesting. The roller coaster in his life. And not that just again he's becoming somebody, but on top of that, the Bible says Joseph was very handsome in form and appearance. Very, very attractive man. Those of you ladies who are single, if you lived at Joseph time, he would be your top pick. You would pray, you would fast, you would do anything you can to get this guy. He was the best that the world had to offer, from outside and from inside. Isn't that right? The top guy. He's the benchmark. Joseph was very handsome in form and appearance. And do you know that these words, very handsome in form and appearance, are used only for 4 men in the Bible? Only for 4 men. Joseph was one of them. This is a trivia question for you. Who were the other 3 men? Good job. Good job. Anybody else? Beside Absalom. The words very handsome in form and appearance. Not really. It was more used that he was strong, but not very handsome in form and appearance. Those are the strongest compliments physically that you can get. It was David, that's right. Absalom, David, and one before David. Who was the king before David? Saul. For the Saul. So only for 2 men. And Joseph was one of them. And imagine now, think about that. He was somebody, he became nobody. Now again, he's somebody again because of his position, CEO in Potiphar's house and company. And on top of that, you are so attractive. Wow. You see, there is nothing wrong with being physically well-built and handsome. But with these attributes come unique temptations. Sometimes our greatest strengths can be our greatest temptations. It's a double-edged sword. Joseph was a young, good-looking man who, without interest in doing so, that was not his intention, caught the eye of his master's wife. Uh-oh, this is the soap for those of you who like soap operas. I hope you don't waste your time watching that garbage. You see, it was on those physical attributes that the enemy of Joseph's soul, the tempter, the Satan, concentrated. He focused on that, on his strengths, not just his weaknesses. So the devil sometimes tempts us by using our strengths, not just our weaknesses. And in Genesis 39, verse 7, and it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast longing eyes on Joseph. And she said, lie with me. Wow. Potiphar's wife was boldly and shamelessly aggressive. You see, there are 3 categories of temptation. 3 categories of temptation. And I'm sharing this from Charles Lindahl. He put it very well. And the categories of temptation. The first one is material temptation. The lust for things. Houses, cars, jewelry, toys, whatever. Material temptations, the lust for things. The second category of temptation is personal temptation. The lust for fame, authority, power, or control over other people. And the third category of temptation is sensual temptation. The lust for another person, or better say, the person's body. So the question is, which one of these temptations are yours and mine? Which one is devil using to tempt you and bring you to ruins? So we have to be aware of these things. You see, this sensual temptation is a hedonistic desire to have and enjoy that which is not one's own, either legally or morally. And without hesitation, Joseph responded with equal boldness. Have you noticed that? With equal boldness. Genesis 39, verses 8 and 9. But he refused and said to his master's wife, "Look, my master doesn't know what is with me in the house, and he has committed all that he has to my hand. There is no greater in this house than I, nor has he kept back anything from me but you, because you're his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? How can I commit such a wickedness?" Joseph refused. He said no. And there are two reasons why Joseph refused. Two reasons why Joseph refused. Joseph said no because of, first, his loyalty to his master. His loyalty to his master. He said, "My master trusts me. I could never betray his trust. I am his favorite servant. How could I do to him such a thing?" And second reason, his loyalty to God. His loyalty to God. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? Joseph did not respond. Have you noticed this? Joseph did not respond with words, "I cannot do that because I'll end up in hell." He didn't say, "I cannot do that because I won't enjoy eternal life if I do that." No. What he says, "I cannot sin against God and Potiphar, who treated me so nicely. I cannot disappoint and break their hearts after all the good things that they have done for me. After all good treatment from them. This is how I'm going to repay them? By disappointing them and hurting them? I cannot and do not want to do something that is wrong." And some of us may be thinking, if you strongly resist temptation like that, it will be out of your life forever. You wish. Let's read on. Genesis 39:10. "So it was, as he spoke to Joseph day by day, that he did not heed her, to lie with her, or to be with her." Potiphar's wives refused to take no for an answer. She wasn't about to be ignored, so she pressed Joseph day after day after day. It was continuous seduction, not just once, daily. And one song says, "It's the ones who resist that we most want to kiss." All his talk about those noble reasons for resisting only intensified her determination. The only thing that she wanted is to gratify her sensual desire right now. And Charles Lindahl, in his book, Biography on Joseph, on pages 28 and 29, he says, "If you are living in the imaginary bubble that somehow temptations, once resisted, will vanish, burst it this very moment. As a matter of fact, when you think like this, you become an even greater target for the tempter. Furthermore, it helps to keep in mind that the tempter wants the respected person, the person who is quoted by others, the successful individual, the trusted partner, the godly soul. That's why it's not surprising Potiphar's wife went after Joseph with such relentless persistence. He was a catch. Get him. Get that guy. And she had conquered something. But you see, Joseph refused to budge. He continued to resist. Not only did he not listen to her, he did not even want to be near her. She was not safe to be around. And this is a lesson for us, that the best way to overcome temptation is to avoid temptation. Is not to come up and say, I'm strong, I will overcome. I'm a drug addict, I'm going to go to the pub or club where they sell drugs, and over there I'm going to resist it. That's not the place where you're going to overcome that. You stay away from that place. Or if you're alcohol addicted, you don't go to the pubs and try there to overcome your addiction. You stay away from temptation. And that's the best way to overcome temptation, by staying away from temptation. But that's not always possible. That's not always possible. Devil will come to you one way or the other. It's impossible in our lives to always stay away from temptation. And in Genesis 39, verses 11 till 20 says, but it happened about this time when Joseph went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the house was inside, that she caught him by his garment, saying, "Lie with me." But he left his garment in her hands and fled and ran outside. And so it was, when she saw that he had left his garments in her hand and fled outside, that she called to the men of her house and spoke to them, saying, "See, he has brought it to us a Hebrew to mock us. He came in to me to lie with me, and I cried out with a loud voice. And it happened, when he heard that I lifted my voice and cried out, that he left his garment with me and fled and went outside. So she kept his garment with her until his master came home. Then she spoke to him with words like this, saying, the Hebrew servant whom you brought to us, came in to me to mock me. So it happened, as I lifted my voice and cried out, that he left his garments with me and fled outside. So it was, when his master heard the words which his wife spoke to him, saying, your servant did to me after this manner, that his anger was aroused. Then Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, a place where the king's prisoners were confined. And he was there in the prison. Charles Lindahl, in his book on Joseph, on page 30, says, whenever the New Testament lingers on the subject of sensual temptation, it gives us one command: run. The Bible does not tell us to reason with it. It does not tell us to think about it and claim verse. It tells us, flee. I have discovered you cannot yield to sensuality if you are running away from it. So run for your life. Get out of there. If you try to reason with lust or play around with sensual thoughts, you will finally yield. You can't fight it. That's why the Spirit of God forcefully commands, run. Run. And that is exactly what Joseph did. He fled. He ran outside. But Potiphar's wife was enraged. She was left standing there with his garment in her hand. And this scorned woman wanted only revenge. And having lusted after him, she now despised him, which resulted in accusation of rape. She built a false case against Joseph using his garment as a circumstantial evidence. Note again the importance of clothing in the Joseph story. It seems to me that his clothing caused him many problems. In every trouble that he was involved, his clothes was involved. Have you noticed that? And maybe sometimes some of us have troubles because of the way we dress. I don't know. But we need to examine how we dress also. So we are not tempting nobody, neither bringing temptation to ourselves. Modesty is a good thing to have in mind when we choose our clothing. So, in all these situations, we see Joseph again being in trouble. But instead of being rewarded for his integrity, Joseph was thrown into the prison. Is that what you get when you do what's right? One more time, he becomes nobody. Remember, he was somebody with his father, and he was nobody as a slave. And he became the steward of his Potiphar's house, somebody now again. Now he's a slave in prison accused of rape. Even lower. You can't get lower than that. But you see, there is evidence here to support the idea that Potiphar did not totally believe his wife. Just think about that. If he believed a slave had attempted to rape and disgrace his wife, he would have killed him right there on the spot. Not put him into prison. But to save the reputation of his master's house, Joseph was abandoned to disgrace and bondage. In order to save his face, Potiphar put Joseph in prison. Seems to me Potiphar was mainly angry at having lost his best servant due to a wife he knew to be unfaithful. But that as it may, Joseph still wound up being behind bars. And F.B. Mayer, in his book on Joseph, Beloved, Hated, and Exalted, on page 24, says, talking about the first time, the bad thing that happened to him when his brother sold him, and applies to the second time, when he is wrongfully accused, says, little did he think then that hereafter he should look back on that day as one of the most gracious things in a chain of loving providences. It is very sweet as life passes by to be able to look back on dark and mysterious event and to trace the hand of God where we once saw only the malice and cruelty of man or a woman. Isn't this interesting? Sometimes in the worst thing that happened to us, this is the last thing that we can see God's hand. Not that God is the cause of that. God allows that. But if God allows something bad to happen, there is always some higher reason that only future will explain us. And sometimes the eternity. But there is always a reason for that. And again in Romans chapter 8, verse 28 says, and we know that God causes everything to work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purpose for them. And as we continue the biography of Joseph, we will see how God used even this bad event to turn something bad into something beautiful. And as we are wrapping up this morning, when we think about overcoming temptation, there are 5 things that we learn from Joseph's experience in the Bible. 5 things. First one, make decision today to do only what is right and not to do what is wrong. Because if you wait to make that decision when the temptation comes, you will most likely fail. So today I want to make decision to be like Joseph. Today I want to make decision to do what's right and resist what's wrong. So when it comes later on, I already have my stand. If you're trying to find your stand or what you think and feel about the temptation when the temptation is there, it's too late. Too late. Second thing, have a daily relationship with God so God can empower you to do what is right and to empower you to resist temptation. There is no way that on our own, with this sinful nature that we have, that we can always do what's right and never do what's wrong and resist temptation. Only God, through relationship with us, can empower us and give us strength so we can do what's right and resist temptations in our lives. Number 3, the best way to overcome temptation is to stay away from temptation. Stay away from temptation as Joseph stayed away as much as he could from Potiphar's wife. As much as you can, stay away from temptation. That's the best way to overcome it. Eventually, temptation will come. But when the temptation comes to you, remember that is God's filter. God filtered it. God promised that He will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able. Remember? Sometimes devil tries to trick us and say, you can't stand this. This is too much for you. No. If God allowed this on me, I can, through His strength, resist this. Otherwise, God would have never allowed this temptation in my life, or adversity, or whatever. So every temptation, every adversity is God's filter. Remember that. And 5, when the temptation comes, do not reason or negotiate with the devil, but resist, flee, and run like Joseph. And I pray that will be our decision today. That we'll make the decision today to do what's right. So when the temptation comes, it will be easier to resist. That we will make decision today to have daily relationship with God, because only through His power, only if we are connected with Him, we will be able to do what's right and resist what's wrong. That we will be wise enough and make decision today to stay away from the people or places or things that tempt us. That we will remember that every temptation is God's filter. That God will never allow to be tempted beyond what you can able. And then when temptation comes, that we will not reason and negotiate, but that we will resist, flee, and run. May God bless each one of us. Amen.